You did not arrive here by coincidence. There is something within you, quiet, ancient, and unwavering, that brought you to this very moment. Perhaps it isn't the surface part of you, the one that scrolls and clicks and calculates. No, this pull comes from deeper down, from the quiet whisper of your soul that knows when change is stirring beneath the surface long before anything visible appears. Maybe lately you've felt it, the sense that something is shifting, unraveling, even if you can't name it. Familiar things seem strange. The ground beneath you feels uncertain. Patterns you once trusted no longer make sense. Life doesn't respond to your efforts the way it used to. And in those moments of quiet, something inside you wonders, am I falling apart? Or is something new trying to break through? Let's pause there. Because that question, raw, vulnerable, sacred, might be the most honest thing you've felt in a long time. And if it is, if any part of you resonates with those words, I invite you to stay. This is not just another video, it is an opening, a threshold, a mirror that reflects back the truth you may have sensed, but haven't yet spoken aloud. You are not alone in this. You're not the only one feeling like the pieces of your old life no longer fit together. You're not the only one wondering why the dreams you once chased now feel strangely hollow. You're not the only one waking in the middle of the night with a feeling you can't quite explain, but cannot ignore either. You're not lost. You're being called. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the external life begins to tremble under the weight of an inner transformation. The moment when the self you've outgrown starts to crack. Not because something is wrong, but because something more authentic is trying to emerge. This video is for that moment. And for you. Carl Jung once said that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And its true transformation doesn't begin when things are perfect. It begins when the cracks appear, when the questions arrive, when the old answers stop working. So if you're here, it's not a coincidence, it's a confirmation, a sign that your inner world is already paying attention, already moving toward a deeper truth. And what we're about to explore together is not a quick fix or a surface-level solution. It's a journey into the heart of becoming, into the sacred process of inner awakening. In the moments ahead, we'll walk through 7 unmistakable signs that your life is not falling apart, but breaking open. And if even a few of these echo in your chest, then the journey has already begun. Something within you is stirring, reaching for clarity, for purpose, for something more true. But before we begin, I want to invite you into something deeper. If what you hear in this video stirs a quiet yes inside you, let it be more than just another piece of content you passively consume. Subscribe to this channel not just to stay updated, but to say yes to a space that honors this transformation. Turn on notifications so that every time a new message arrives, it finds you exactly when you need it. This is not about following, it's about remembering. About choosing to walk this path with others who are also awakening, questioning, and rising. So take a breath. Let go of everything you think you need to figure out. And listen. Not with your mind, but with that deeper part of you, the one that's always known. This moment would come. The journey doesn't begin when everything makes sense. It begins when you choose to listen anyway. Let's begin. The first unmistakable sign that your soul is preparing for a profound transformation is this. You begin to question everything you once called truth. Not out of rebellion, not out of restlessness or boredom, but from a place far deeper and quieter. There is a whisper inside you, new one, that no longer allows you to simply accept what once seemed certain. It doesn't scream. It doesn't argue. It simply refuses to be ignored. You may find yourself looking at your life, your beliefs, your relationships, your identity, even your dream sand, sensing that something no longer fits. There is a growing disconnect between the life you are living and the person you are becoming. And while on the outside everything may appear intact, on the inside, the tectonic plates are shifting, subtly, powerfully, unstoppably. This is the threshold where many feel lost, where the world you once trusted begins to blur. You question the career path you thought you wanted. The relationships that once grounded you now feel misaligned. The goals you were praised for chasing begin to feel strangely hollow. And perhaps most disorienting of all, the voice you once believed was yours begins to sound like an echo of someone else's expectations. But this unraveling is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is, in fact, a sacred moment. In the symbolic language of the psyche, as Carl Jung taught, chaos is rarely without meaning. The mind may label it confusion. The world may call it a crisis. But the soul knows better. It knows this is the necessary cracking open before the emergence of something more whole. Picture a seed underground, in darkness, pressure mounting. The shell begins to split. If you were to judge it by surface appearances, you might say it's falling apart. But that would be a mistake. The seed isn't dying. It's becoming. And so are you. In this phase, you might begin to feel an increasing discomfort with conversations that once felt engaging. You might sense irritation or unease in environments that once energized you. Even your own inner dialogue begins to shift. Questions rise urgent, insistent. Who am I beneath the roles I play? What do I truly believe, not because I was told to, but because I feel it to be real? What parts of my life are authentic, and what parts were constructed to please, to survive, to fit in? These aren't surface-level curiosities. They are portals. And once they open, you cannot go back to sleep. There's a deep intelligence to this kind of inner dismantling. It is not random. It is precise. Your psyche begins stripping away beliefs that no longer serve you, patterns that no longer grow you, values that were inherited but never truly chosen. At first, this process can feel terrifying, because what is left when the scaffolding of the old self begins to fall away? Emptiness? Silence? Not quite. What remains beneath the rubbly space, and that space, as uncomfortable as it may be, is sacred. It is not a void. It is an invitation. Carl Jung, a lesser-known but powerful thinker, once suggested that inner dismantling is not a crisis, it is an initiation. And that distinction changes everything. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. The loss of certainty is not a regression. It is the necessary ground clearing before the planting of something far more authentic. You begin to feel it in strange ways. Your appetite for distraction lessens. You begin to crave silence, not out of avoidance, but because something inside you is speaking softly, but insistently. The mask begins to slip. The performance starts to exhaust you. You no longer have the energy to pretend. This is not depression. It is not failure. It is the fatigue of a soul that has grown too large for its container. And this is where many people misunderstand the journey. They try to patch up the cracks. They double down on old goals. They cling tighter to what is falling apart. But the ones who listen truly listen, begin to see this moment for what it is. A sacred disruption. A calling home. There is grief here. Yes, you might mourn the old self, the old dreams, the old roles you played so well. But grief is not a sign of weakness. It is proof that you are alive to your becoming. And what you are mourning was never meant to last. It was a chapter, a necessary one, but not the whole story. This phase is deeply personal. No one can fully walk it for you. But that doesn't mean you are alone. Countless others are on this path, too quietly, courageously dismantling what no longer feels true. And when you begin to meet them through books, through conversations, through sudden synchronicities, you will recognize them instantly. Not by what they say, but by the energy they carry. It's the energy of someone who has stopped pretending. In this space, a new language begins to form. One of resonance, of clarity, of subtle knowing. You begin to notice patterns that once escaped you. Dreams linger longer. Signs appear more frequently. You hear a line in a film, and it cuts through you. You read a passage in a book, and it feels like it was written just for you. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations. Your inner and outer worlds are beginning to align. But alignment doesn't always come with ease. It often arrives through discomfort, through disorientation, through the courageous willingness to sit in the unknown. And that's what this first sign truly is. The emergence of your inner compass. Not the one built from culture, or fear, or approval, but the one that has been quietly waiting for you to remember it. So if you find yourself questioning everything, if your inner world feels in flux, if what once gave you a sense of purpose now feels strangely empty, take heart. This is not your end. This is your beginning. The most authentic version of you does not wait in some distant future. It is already stirring within you. Not as an idea, but as a presence. As a truth too alive to ignore. This is the sacred unraveling. The quiet cracking open. The beginning of becoming. The first sign that your soul is preparing to step forward and live a life that is no longer dictated by survival but shaped by truth. And now, if this first sign resonates, prepare yourself, because what comes next only deepens the journey. When you begin to feel a growing disconnection from who you once were, the transformation is not just stirring, it has already begun. The second sign of inner awakening does not come with thunder or grand epiphany. It arrives quietly, like morning mist dissolving around the edges of your life. You begin to feel a growing, inexplicable disconnection from the person you once were. And at first, you might not even realize it is happening. It starts subtly, a shift in your energy, a sense of no longer fitting into conversations that once felt natural, a feeling of foreignness in spaces that once felt like home. This detachment is not rooted in judgment or resentment. It isn't born from conflict. It's born from clarity. And it may confuse you because it doesn't come with a clear reason. You wake up one day and realize that the ambitions you once held so tightly no longer inspire you. The routines that used to bring comfort now feel heavy. The relationships you once fought to maintain start to fade without drama. Something inside you is quietly releasing what you no longer resonate with. In Jungian psychology, this is known as the shedding of the personality mask we wear to fit into society, to survive, to belong. For much of our lives, we play roles. We become who we are expected to be, and there is nothing inherently wrong with that. It is part of growing up, part of learning how to navigate the world. But there comes a time when the roles no longer feel like you. When the mask grows too tight, when the cost of pretending becomes too high, you might notice yourself pulling back from certain social settings, not out of fear, but out of fatigue. You might avoid conversations that feel performative, hollow, or filled with subtle expectations. You may even start to avoid people who once gave you a sense of identity, because now, in their presence, you feel yourself slipping back into an older version of you, one that no longer feels true. And again, this shift does not have to be dramatic. It often isn't. It's more like a gentle unweaving. The threads of your past self begin to loosen, not in one swift motion, but strand by strand. It may feel like a quiet grief, a mourning for the person you once were, because even if that version of you wasn't fully authentic, it was still familiar. And letting go of the familiar, even when it no longer fits, always carries a touch of sadness. But this sadness is sacred. It's not depression, it's not failure. It's a form of rebirth. Your soul is making space. It is clearing out what no longer aligns so that something deeper, something truer can emerge. This disconnection is not a collapse. It's a recalibration. You may also find yourself drawn to solitude during this time, not as a retreat, but as a return. A return to yourself, to your thoughts, your breath, your presence. You may crave silence, not because you are lonely, but because silence has become your most honest companion. In that silence, the noise of old expectations begins to fade, and something clearer begins to rise. This is not a withdrawal. It is a deepening. You are no longer interested in performing for approval. You are no longer motivated by validation. What you seek now is resonance, genuine connection, inner peace, soul truth. And that longing shifts everything. What once excited you now feels like obligation. What once grounded you now feels like entrapment. And here is where the third sign begins to surface. As your old self gently unravels, you begin to reevaluate what you once believed was essential. The things that used to anchor you, titles, achievements, social validation, start to lose their hold. It is not that they disappear entirely, it's that they no longer define you. They no longer hold the same power over your decisions, your emotions, your sense of worth. You may find yourself startled by how suddenly your priorities shift. What once filled you with ambition now leaves you indifferent. The chase no longer excites you. You begin to wonder whether success, as it was once defined for you, is even something you want. Instead of asking, "How can I be more impressive?" you begin asking, "What brings me peace?" Instead of, "How do I succeed?" the question becomes, "How do I feel fulfilled?" And often, these questions arise not in moments of triumph, but in moments of quiet discontent. Perhaps you achieve something you've long pursued, only to find that it doesn't fill the emptiness you hoped it would. Perhaps someone praises you, and rather than feeling joy, you feel nothing. Or perhaps a moment of stillness, of presence, reveals how deeply tired you are of playing the game. This disorientation is not a breakdown. It's an awakening. You are beginning to see through the illusion. The scripts you once followed no longer make sense. The rules you once obeyed feel arbitrary. You are not falling apart. You are waking up. And with that awakening comes a deep inner knowing, a clarity that does not come from logic, but from truth. You begin to sense that what matters most is not what others see, but what you feel when you're alone with yourself. Your soul starts to whisper questions that challenge the foundations of your old life. What would it look like to live with intention? What would it mean to create a life based on meaning, rather than measurement? This stage can be confusing. It can feel like being caught between two worlds: the old world, which you no longer believe in, and the new world, which you cannot yet fully see. But this in-between space is sacred. It is where your new self begins to take shape. You may rediscover passions you'd buried. You might feel drawn to paths that once seemed irrational. You might start saying no to things you used to say yes to. Not because you've changed your mind, but because you've changed your center. The place from which you choose is now different. It is quieter, deeper, truer. Even your relationships begin to shift. Some grow distant. Others dissolve altogether. But again, this isn't rejection. It's realignment. You're no longer willing to invest your energy in connections that don't reflect who you are becoming. And that creates space for new people to arrive. People who see you as you are now, not as who you were. This detachment from the old, and this reevaluation of the essential mark, a profound pivot point in your journey. They are not symptoms of crisis. They are signs of growth, of expansion, of soul-level transformation. Carl Jung spoke often of individuation, the process by which we become our most whole, integrated selves. And this phase is where that process begins to take root, not in a flash of enlightenment, but in the quiet decision to stop pretending, to stop chasing, to stop compromising. You are not giving up. You are giving into something more honest, more aligned, more lasting. So if you feel disconnected from your past self, if your old definitions of meaning no longer satisfy you, know this: you are not broken. You are breaking free. You are being reshaped, redefined, not by the world around you, but by the truth rising from within you. And as this inner reshaping continues, a new foundation begins to form. One built not on appearance, but on authenticity. Not on performance, but on presence. This is not the end of your story. It's the end of a chapter you've outgrown. And in the next chapter, something even more powerful begins to unfold: your deepening connection to the voice within, your intuition, your inner compass. And that, as you will soon see, changes everything. The fourth sign of deep inner transformation arrives not as an argument in the mind, but as a quiet resonance in the body. You begin to feel an intimate connection with your intuition. Not the kind of intuition that whispers vague feelings you easily ignore. No, this is different. This is a knowing that cuts through confusion, a clarity that rises from beneath the noise, bypassing logic altogether. It doesn't explain itself. It just feels undeniably right. This awakening often begins subtly. You may find yourself making decisions not because you've reasoned them out, but because they simply feel aligned. You walk into a room and sense something is off, even if everyone is smiling. You meet someone and feel drawn to them, without understanding why. You stand at a crossroads and your body, not your mind, leans toward one path. These moments may seem minor, but together they point to something profound. You're beginning to trust your inner compass. Carl Jung spoke of the self as the totality of the psyche, the central archetype guiding our individuation. As we draw closer to this inner center, intuition strengthens. Not because we've suddenly acquired a new skill, but because we've cleared enough inner noise to finally hear what was always there. In earlier stages of life, many of us learn to distrust intuition. We're taught to follow rules, reason, evidence, logic. We suppress the quiet voice in favor of external validation. But as your transformation deepens, those old systems begin to falter. They no longer offer the security they once did. And in their place, something older and wiser begins to rise. This voice does not come from fear. It doesn't react. It responds. It moves slowly, deliberately. It might tell you to pause when you feel rushed. It might nudge you to speak when you feel afraid. It might guide you toward a decision that makes no sense on paper, but brings a strange peace to your chest. The more you listen, the more you realize it has always been guiding you. You were simply too distracted to notice. At first, following your intuition may feel like walking in the dark. It asks for trust. It requires surrender. It often leads you away from what is comfortable toward what is true. And that shift can be unsettling. You may have moments of doubt, moments when the mind fights back, demanding proof. But in time, you begin to recognize the pattern. Every time you ignore your intuition, you feel disconnected. Every time you follow it, even without full understanding, life aligns in unexpected, meaningful ways. This is the sacred intelligence of the soul. It doesn't need to explain. It doesn't need permission. It simply knows. And once this inner knowing becomes your guide, the fifth sign of transformation begins to emerge: a quiet, relentless longing for growth. Not the kind of growth defined by ambition or improvement. This is a deeper hunger. A longing not to become more, but to become more real. You begin to feel a fire inside, a sacred discontent that will no longer let you settle for what is familiar but hollow. You no longer wish to merely survive. You want to evolve. You want to remember. You want to shed the false and touch the raw beauty of your most honest self. What once entertained you now feels like noise. What once distracted you now feels like a waste. Your attention narrows. Your focus deepens. You want meaning. You want truth. You want to live from the inside out, no longer shaped by who others think you should be. This is the call of the soul. And when it comes, it is not loud or dramatic. It is steady, persistent. It shows up in small but undeniable ways. You might find yourself drawn to certain books, teachers, or practices that never caught your interest before. You might feel a pull towards silence, nature, contemplation. You might begin to ask deeper questions. Who am I, really? What is my purpose? What wounds am I still carrying, and what part of me is ready to heal? These questions are not the beginning of confusion. They are the beginning of clarity. They signal that you are ready to leave behind the stories you were handed and begin writing your own. This longing for growth often coincides with a growing sensitivity. You start to notice things more acutely: the energy in a room, the emotion in someone's voice, the pain behind someone's smile. This is not weakness. It's awareness. Your inner world is expanding. You are no longer numbed by habit. You are waking up to what is real. And in that waking, you begin to feel the difference between what feeds your soul and what drains it. You become more discerning. You choose more intentionally. Not because you are better than anyone else, but because you have stopped betraying yourself. You have stopped trading authenticity for approval. Carl Jung referred to this process as individuation, the journey of becoming whole, of integrating both light and shadow, of reclaiming the parts of ourselves we once abandoned. And that is exactly what is happening here. You are not just growing, you are recovering yourself. You are remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. This stage is not about achievement, it's about alignment. It's not about adding more. It's about removing what no longer belongs. You're not trying to be someone else. You're trying to come home to yourself. It is not easy. Growth often comes with discomfort. There may be moments when you want to return to what was safe and familiar, but something inside you refuses. The old life no longer fits. The old patterns no longer work. You are no longer willing to sacrifice your soul for comfort. And this is what makes the fifth sign so powerful. It doesn't just change your thoughts, it changes your choices. You begin to move differently, speak differently, relate differently. You seek out people who meet you in your depth. You create boundaries not from fear, but from self-respect. You honor your time, your energy, your truth. You may feel alone at times. Transformation often brings solitude. But this solitude is not emptiness. It is space for the new self to take root. And as that self grows, you begin to notice the world responding. New connections appear. New opportunities arise. Life begins to mirror the change within you. This is not coincidence. This is resonance. You are becoming a living frequency, and what you attract now reflects who you truly are, not who you used to pretend to be. So if you are feeling the rise of intuition, if you are longing for something deeper, if you are being pulled toward a life of growth, know this: you are right on time. The path you are on is not linear. It is sacred. It may not make sense to others. It may not even make sense to your old self. But to your soul, it is the only path worth walking. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are awakening. And in that awakening, you are beginning to remember something essential. That the most important journey you will ever take is the one that leads you back to the truth of who you are. From this place of knowing, the path ahead begins to shift. Not because it becomes easier, but because it becomes truer. And when you begin to trust that truth, the next sign reveals itself: the urge to release what is toxic, misaligned, and unworthy of the person you are becoming. That is where we go next. The sixth sign of profound inner transformation comes with a quiet, irreversible shift in your tolerance. You begin to feel an undeniable urge to break free from toxic relationships, draining dynamics, and confining patterns that once seemed normal, even necessary. These are no longer small irritations or occasional conflicts. This is something deeper. A sacred clarity rises from within you, a voice that says, "I can no longer stay in what stifles my soul." This is not rebellion. It is revelation. You are no longer able to lie to yourself. The masks people wear, the games they play, the conditional love you once accepted, all begin to feel unbearable. What you once rationalized, you now see clearly. What you once tolerated, you now recognize as betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. This kind of awakening does not require confrontation. It does not need chaos. It arrives in stillness. One day you simply feel it. "I can't keep doing this." And that sentence changes everything. You begin to withdraw, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You don't have the energy to argue anymore. You don't want to convince anyone. You're not trying to prove your worth. You're simply done with dynamics that dishonor who you are becoming. You begin to see people as they are, not as you hoped they would be. You notice the patterns you used to repeat: overgiving, shrinking, self-abandoning in the name of harmony. And now, those patterns feel foreign, not because others have changed, but because you have. You're no longer a match for them. Your frequency has shifted. There is power in this shift, but also grief. because many of the connections you are now outgrowing are not with strangers. They are with people you've loved, people you've invested in, people who were part of your life for years. Letting go of these relationships is not easy. It's painful, but the pain is sacred. It is the cost of liberation. Carl Jung spoke of the false self, the persona we create to survive in the world. That persona often ties us to relationships that reflect our wounds rather than our worth. When we begin to dissolve the false self, those relationships can no longer sustain themselves. Not because we don't care, but because we care too much about our own truth to keep abandoning it. This process is not about blaming others. It's about honoring yourself. It's about recognizing the difference between connection and attachment, between support and dependency, between love and control. And when you see that difference clearly, you begin to choose differently. You no longer try to fix what refuses to grow. You no longer stay to keep the peace if the price is your own silence. You no longer call it love when it feels like survival. This clarity is not cruel. It is kind. It protects your energy. It guards your becoming. And it makes space for relationships that nourish instead of deplete, for environments that reflect your values, for choices that align with your deepest truth. As you distance yourself from what no longer fits, something new begins to emerge. It doesn't always come quickly. Sometimes there is an empty space, a quiet between the old and the new, and that space can feel lonely. But that loneliness is honest. It's not a signal to return to what hurt you. It's an invitation to remain faithful to your path, even when it's quiet. And soon, in that space, new resonance begins to form. You meet people who see you not the role you played, but the truth you embody. You connect with souls who speak the same language, who value depth over performance, who show up with presence instead of pretense. This is not fantasy. It is alignment. And it becomes possible only when you have the courage to release the false, to end the cycles, to say no with love, and yes to yourself. So if you find yourself distancing from certain people, walking away from certain roles, shedding certain habits, it is not a breakdown. It is the soul's way of choosing freedom. And freedom is not the absence of responsibility. It is the presence of authenticity, which leads us into the seventh and final sign of this inner transformation, a profound and unmistakable detachment from what once held weight in your life. This detachment does not come from apathy. It comes from evolution. You are not bitter. You are simply no longer bound. You look at the habits, the beliefs, the goals that once defined you, and they no longer move you. Not because they weren't real, but because they no longer belong to the person you're becoming. It's as if the emotional gravity they once held has dissolved. You no longer feel compelled to chase what you once thought you needed. You no longer feel obligated to perform for a life you no longer identify with. There is a strange peace in this stage. Even though nothing on the outside may have changed, everything inside has. You begin to feel a spaciousness in your being. You no longer fight what's fading. You allow it to leave, not out of indifference, but out of reverence for what's coming. And yes, this can be disorienting. You may wake up in the same place, with the same people, in the same routines, but feel as if your entire inner world has changed. And it has. You've stepped through a threshold. You've crossed from seeking into seeing, from effort into embodiment. Carl Jung taught that the psyche evolves not through addition, but integration. And often, integration requires subtraction, a letting go, a cleansing, a sacred surrender of what no longer serves. This detachment is not passive. It is active trust. It's a vote of confidence in your own becoming. It's a decision to release the life that was built on shoulds and step into a life built on truth. You no longer crave what is loud. You crave what is true. You no longer chase the world. You align with your soul. So if you find yourself in this place where people, goals, routines, even dreams begin to lose their hold and panic, don't rush to replace them. Let the space remain open for a while. Let the silence speak. Let the detachment deepen. Because in that space, your next life is forming, not a better version of the old. A new architecture entirely. You are not ending, you are beginning again. And this time, you are doing it on your own terms, with your own voice, in your own rhythm. What comes next is not built from who you were, it is born from who you are becoming. And that becoming is sacred. The journey you've been walking quietly, courageously, is not one of collapse. It is a return, a sacred remembering of something your soul has always known, but that your life may have forgotten. Every moment of disorientation, every question you couldn't answer, every relationship that faded or fell apart, every dream that dissolved, none of it was meaningless. It was the architecture of the old self beginning to loosen so that something more authentic could take root. This is not the dramatic rebirth of storybooks or the polished transformation so often portrayed in the media. This is something quieter, subtler, more enduring. It is the slow, steady unveiling of who you were before the world told you who to be. It is not a process of becoming better. It is a process of becoming more real. You may not feel like you've arrived anywhere, and that's because the most important shifts don't come with fanfare. They don't look like success on the outside. They feel like truth on the inside. They feel like walking through your life with a deeper breath, with clearer eyes, with a quieter mind. They feel like saying no without guilt, like choosing peace over performance, like finally feeling safe enough within yourself to stop trying to be anything but honest. Carl Jung reminded us that transformation does not begin by striving toward the light, but by bringing awareness to the darkness. And you have done exactly that. You've allowed yourself to question, to grieve, to let go, to feel, to grow. That is not a breakdown. That is the essence of rebirth. You are no longer moving through life from a place of reaction, but from a place of resonance. You are no longer chasing meaning. You are embodying it. You are beginning to live in alignment with the rhythm of your soul, not perfectly, but more consciously, more bravely. The truth is, transformation is rarely one moment. It is 1,000 small choices, 1,000 quiet recognitions that the life you were handed is not the same as the life you are meant to create. And you are creating it now. Whether or not you can see its full form, it is already unfolding beneath the surface in your decisions, in your energy, in your refusal to keep betraying yourself. This is the real threshold. Not the moment everything changes, but the moment you realize you have changed. The world around you may still look the same, but the way you walk through it, the way you choose, the way you listen, that is entirely different now. So take a breath, not because you've arrived, but because you've begun. Let yourself feel the gravity of that. Let yourself trust it. There is no need to rush, no need to prove, no need to grasp for what's next. What's next is already forming within you. And if something within you stirred as you listened, it is not by accident. It is the deeper part of you responding to something it already recognizes as truth. Let that part of you lead. Let it become the voice you follow when the path ahead feels uncertain. This is your sacred awakening. Not an escape from reality, but a return to it. A return to what is real, what is whole, what is quietly and profoundly yours. You are not late, you are not lost, you are right on time. And this silent becoming is only the beginning.